Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome from wherever you're coming from. Please give me a thumbs up or a hello in the chat just to make sure that the technology is working as expected. I'm so excited. Today's session is actually one of my favorite. If you notice from my presentations, there are some sessions that I'm just so excited about. And I love this one because it's so easy, yet it is the most avoided. All right. And the reason being is it's in the title. Okay. If we look at that title, right, it's invisible, it's hidden. Okay. And so people don't know what to do with it, they avoid it. These are all the symptoms that we're going to dive into. But as usual, before I start, let's just have a quick reminder. This is chapter 4 of part 2 from the Leadership Intelligence Handbook. 186 different strategies, 196 different strategies that you can access. We've got online tools to accelerate that so we can pinpoint exactly which chapters you should look at. So if you're interested, the book is coming out very, very shortly. So reach out and connect so that we can help you do that. All right. And I will share my email and information shortly so that you can do that. So without further ado, let's dive into what this is all about and what you're going to learn today. But first of all, as usual, if I can get my clicker working, there we go. This is week 4 of 7 from part 2. There's 6 chapters, and then we'll do a bit of a wrap up so we can actually take the full lessons from those chapters and apply them more effectively. As usual, I remind you, I am going through these fairly quickly. We do have courses and masterclasses around each one of these topics. So if you're interested and want to participate in those, again, reach out. This isn't a sales pitch. There isn't a sales slide at this. You're going to need to reach out to get access to those. So part 2, chapter 1 so far, we've covered the science of observation, the facts, not the stories. We've looked at the behavior patterns and how to decode those, what it means, how it works, how the brain works. We're going to dive into that a little bit more. And we went into filters and biases and distortions and all of those things in the last session last week. And if you want access to those, it's on diqorg.com/events. You'll find those there. All right. So today is making the invisible visible and uncovering those hidden patterns and what to do with those and how to bring about change very easily. As I said, this is an exciting topic. All right. So separating behavior from emotion, and that's really a critical underlying in this. Okay. So let's look at the 90% rule first of all. What does our brain do? This is all the neuroscience stuff. You need to first understand how the brain works and why it does the way it does things, in order to be able to go into helping people changing culture, building teams, and so forth. We joke often, say it's a form of manipulation or brainwashing or all of those things. But you know what? All of those words have negative connotations because we've put them in that box, but they actually have positive, very positive outcomes and results when you help people as opposed to the other, right? So your brain delegates routine tasks into an automatic unconscious pattern that we often refer to as habits. So habits are things that you've done so many times that your brain has myelinated a sheath around that, and it became like a super highway as opposed to, it's kind of like cache on your computer. Cache is designed that, things that you access often are loaded in memory, so they show up instantly. The computer doesn't have to go looking for them, doesn't have to go out on the internet, in the World Wide Web, if you like, to find that information, So that's what your brain is doing with the habits, the things that you do routinely. And so for leaders and coaches, so I'm talking to both, because leaders should be putting on a coaching hat at times with their team members, and coaches bring the external observation to work with the leaders. So that's kind of the dynamics that works best. Leaders and coaches, we tend to see the tip of the iceberg, we don't see the full picture. And what we want to do today is dive into that a little bit deeper so that you get some specificity instead of the vagueness. What does it mean? The tip of the iceberg. Well, what is that? You're going to go out and find an iceberg and see what's under the water? No, right? So there are so many things that are vague that we really need the specificity in order to address them. And that's why AccuMatch has become such a powerful tool, because unlike many other assessments that throw out labels, or even if they don't, they put people in a box and all of these kinds of things that are not useful in today's world, we need that specificity. Okay. And so what drives the performance that you get is usually happening invisibly in people's minds, in their behaviors, in the cues that you're missing because of what we discussed last week, the generalization, the distortion, the deletion that our brain is doing. So understanding these foundational elements will help you to demystify, if you like, the human behavior and how to help people, and how to really motivate the culture that you are in. Okay. And traditional management only addresses the symptoms, not the cause. So BIQ, behavior intelligence, is going to help you reveal what's underneath all of that. We're going to talk about the 5 principles. These are the key principles that we're going to address today. Most behavior is unconscious. We'll dive into that a little bit more. You can't change what you can't see, right? Because, the only thing we have in working with other people is our ability to observe what's going on. And if you can't see it, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make sound, right? If your team is working remotely, are they working? All of those kinds of things that you need to kind of listen and observe and work through. So we'll talk about that. AccuMatch is going to help you reveal what's hidden. So using the tools, the assessments, all of these things and the techniques that I'm going to share today, is going to help you simplify that. And like I said, this is just so easy, right? This chapter, this lesson is amazing, okay? You can't coach what's not observable. So if you're coaching your team or you're coaching your clients, we're going to dive into that. And the 5th one is the most important one down the bottom there. The invisible drives the visible. Okay, so we need to engineer what results we want, and that's kind of my engineering background, my tech background allows me to observe things differently. I'm going to teach you how to do that. You don't need to become an engineer, you don't need to become a psychologist, but you need to understand some of these simple foundational elements that we talk about. So 90% of daily behaviors just runs automatically. Why? Because it's being put into that part of your brain that we talked about that's like a superhighway. It conserves energy. And often micro behaviors determine success. They're the things that you're not seeing, you're not paying attention to, and they're often in tones and gesture and body language. And so when you are working remotely, a lot of those things are difficult to identify and observe. And the brain runs on autopilot. Why? Because it's efficient, right? The only way we can come close to multitasking is when we've done something enough times that our brain can free up our conscious mind to do conscious things while it does unconscious things. Even when I am talking now, all of my hand gestures, my clicker control, a lot of these things are automatic, unconscious, unless they get interrupted. So when I'm clicking and nothing happens, my brain goes from unconscious to conscious to try and figure out what's going on. All of these things, it's just happening so quickly. And as a leader, you need to be aware of what's going on there. So the brain is constantly, it's just like a computer, we get more memory, more speed, more. Why? Because we're putting more stuff into that instantaneous unconscious cache that we talk about. And it's starting to emulate what we do. And, AI and all of these tools, and we're doing a lot of AI stuff. So do watch for my sessions on that. And we'll be launching some new sessions that are specific to what we've been developing to help you be more aligned with the movement. The world's changing so quickly. This year we've just seen such a tremendous change in what's possible in the world. Okay, so those things will hide the culture, the behaviors, the unconscious habits if we don't watch for them. So they become the blind spots that we often talk about, right? What you're missing right now is things, these are just a few examples, all right? So, when you're not paying attention who defers to who, or in meetings, when people don't speak up, they defer to other people to do that. What's going on? Are you paying attention to these things, or are you in it and you can't see it? And that's why we talk about external coaching and internal coaching, the combination of the two, right? So the micro expressions that you dismiss, or maybe you're paying too much attention to, those micro expressions, and they're distracting you from being present, right? So do you label them? Are they causing you an emotional stress in those situations? You need to understand yourself, and we've talked about a lot of these things before. This is really now bringing the next layer into that. Tone shifts indicating stress or confidence, body language patterns, etc. So pay attention to these things. Here's a good example we did with a client. Names obviously changed. Sarah seemed to be checked out. That's what the client was saying, with minimal participation. When we mapped Sarah with the AccuMatch and we saw her patterns and we then checked on these things, the hidden reality was that she was the kind of person that was high reflective and, a little bit contrarian, but mostly really internal and needed to address things in a thoughtful way. So she was processing. It wasn't a disengagement. It was, hang on a sec, I'm still, some people are instantaneous. I love that about those people. I'm not one of those. I have to go away and sleep on things and process it, and even, take that long to really identify with what I could have said, what I could have done, should have done, and all of those things. It's just not possible for some people to be instantaneous like that. And the ones that are instantaneous. I was talking to a HR manager the other day, a director of HR. She's been in that for 30 years. And, she pointed out that the quick answers are often ones that are fabricated because that person's able to do that so quickly. Okay, so be careful of that element sometimes as well. Okay. Sarah didn't make a lot of eye contact. So that was part of what was observed as checked out. But when somebody spoke, she did have eye contact. So she knew how to listen actively and pay attention to that person. She was taking detailed notes of what's going on. So she actually was probably the most or the best informed in the session, in the group. And when we went through all of that and uncovered these things and encouraged that, as we will talk about in a moment, we got away from, oh, she's so difficult, she's an introvert, blah, 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 to all these labels, to actually understanding that, these tools are important for her to be able to participate and be the best that she can be, right? So your judgment comes into that. Now, we can't change what we can't see is the next one. So, the leaders often show up, prescribing new processes, new ideas. We're going to do this, we're going to change the culture. You will change with him and you will change with her. And, we joke about those things, but they don't happen because we don't observe what is happening and document that in order to come up with what is going to be the new. So if you don't do the data collection, okay, the analysis up front, you can't measure change. Right? If you don't have the starting point, you can't figure out. It's just a gut instinct. It's an intuition that cannot be justified, quantified, etc. Right? And when that work is not done, people will revert to their unconscious automatic habits. And all it takes is an interrupt, and all of the effort that was put into to try and do that will then revert. If you fall back, then they fall back, and the whole process has just collapsed and died because those things weren't put in place. You really need to get discipline, and it's so simple. It's about the discipline rather than winging it and throwing it out there and hoping someone will catch it and it will happen. It doesn't work that way. Okay. So before you prescribe change, we need to map it, and by mapping it, yes, you can do the AccuMatch map, and we've got the ability to map people together. We've got the ability to create culture benchmarks of the culture, the team dynamics. All of these things are possible with AccuMatch. But here's a simple process. It's just do this, right? Who does what, when, and how often, okay? Under what specific conditions? What's the trigger? We talked about that last week. What's the trigger that creates that situation? What's the emotional underscores? Because emotion does play into it, and emotion is more about the self-protection, okay? And we talk about that in another session. And then following which triggers and cues and documenting those. And so, here is the 1 week diagnostic process that I'll share with you right now is pick one critical process that you want to improve, okay? Maybe it's your team meetings, maybe it's your client debriefs, your post-analysis of situations, or maybe the pre-analysis of what you're going to launch as a project, okay? Whatever it is, just pick one thing. Assign a rotating observer. Why? Because when someone is assigned to observe only, they can see what's going on. They can see the dynamics. But when you're in it, you can't see it. All right. I've talked about that. That's one of my quotes that I use a lot. Okay. When you're participating, listening, processing, your brain can't easily do observation while it's doing a 100% engagement in the topic. Okay. So rotating the observer allows those people to learn how to observe. We're actually writing a new program in their brain that teaches them how to step out of the in it moment and take small cues to align and so forth. So everybody on the team becomes a great observer, and that's what you want, right? Before they can change the dynamics between themselves, first they need to observe what dynamics exist, right? Okay. And then we get into the data collection, which is the metrics. Okay, so you've picked one thing, you've decided on the rotation. We also do a peer-to-peer arrangement. So we put two people together and we say, or three, and we say, you guys are going to do observation because you work together. You're going to do that on a daily basis and not just in meetings, right? So we can do those kinds of things as well. But you need to start collecting data. They need to keep records so that they can actually go back and show that person, that instant, that situation, what happened, and explain that. And we'll talk about tools to do that. Okay. Note the turn shift, look at these things. And as you're doing this, you're going to see shifts. Okay. It's going to happen that quickly. I don't know who it was that said, whatever you focus on will change. Okay. So if you want change to happen, you need to pick one thing and focus on it. So before mapping, okay, this is an example of a client where they do stand-up meetings, the huddles in the morning, okay? And what they found is everybody's doing a status update and nobody's really doing any problem solving, coming forward with things that could be improved, right? Or identifying them at the very least. Only 3 people talk, the others don't say anything, they just want to get the heck out of there. And so the turn becomes negative, people start falling off, they don't show up, the churn is high. There was all kinds of problems in that situation. After measuring those behaviors and actually identifying the metrics for those, the behavior shift has improved the company so much. So there was a lot more engagement. Everybody got an opportunity to speak. They all came excited to share something. And so the shift from that negativity to excitement about those sessions became the movement, if you like, that created the momentum for change. Mm-hmm. So when we shift from labels, okay, to actual data, we can actually change things a lot more effectively. So the observation, if you like, she looked tense or he interrupted twice. Those are hard to really just deal with them because there's no baseline, there's no data, there is no coaching conversation that can be very specific. It's vague. What does that really look like? What's going on in those situations, right? So the AccuMatch approach, this is part of the behavior intelligence training that we do, the leadership intelligence training, and using AccuMatch not just as a mapping assessment, but also as a methodology to improve dynamics and behavior. So the identified behavior, right? Identifying a specific behavior, it could be autonomy, collaboration, risk management, whatever it is, you need to pick one. Okay. Then identify the observable markers. So what does it look like to be engaged to you, right? I often talk about, most performance reviews are fraught with undocumented expectations, okay? And you have expectations of what you want to observe, but you rarely ever see a manager documenting those observable behaviors because they're not KPIs that are related to their numbers, right? But they are the underpinning foundation to getting those results and numbers. And that's why we do all this behavior intelligence and leadership intelligence work. Okay. So tracking the trend, and again, sorry, keep plugging AccuMatch, the map, we use it to map the before and after, so we can also see the change that they are experiencing neurologically, not just observed, and whether it's sustainable, all of these things, whether we can predict what's going to happen next. So there's just so much that it can do within that. So if you pick one, it doesn't matter which one you want to pick, right? So if you're going to focus on ideas, participation, risks, decisions, all of those, pick the method that you're going to measure that, and rate each one out of 5 over a period of time, and then do a cross sheet. And we can give you one, but it's pretty simple. You can do this on your own fairly easily, and track that for a period of time. And this is what's going to happen. In fact, this was a real case study that was measured with a client, with a coach working with a client. And in week 1, right, what they scored and what they tracked showed that they were only at 2.3 out of 5 on that scale that they created and the measurement that they were looking for, what behaviors that they were looking for, right? Week 2, it improved only slightly. It's not till week 3 that things started to really shift, okay? And by week 4, we're right up there and actually seeing the participation. So the point isn't, come up with something, measure it once and forget about it and hope that it's going to change. That's not going to happen. The point is the practice, the repetition. You've got to persist for at least a month on these things, okay? They are intended to be daily exercises that you do and track, or, I've got all kinds of tools that we can share to help you do that. Okay. I'm the tools king. All right. So you can't coach what you cannot observe. You can't help people change what is not observable, right? The typical example is, I try already is a bad word in there, but actively, what does actively look like to the person saying that, or to you? You don't, listen actively. What's your expectation? What does that behavior look like to you that tells you that that person is not actively listening? So no one knows what that is, and so trying to give feedback and saying that you don't seem to be actively listening to what we're doing. You're distracted, you're looking the other way, what's going on? Are you on your phone? Right? Especially in Zoom sessions when we can't see someone's desk, right? There was Apple introduced a tool that actually lets you have observation of your desk with the same camera that you're on. Anyway, I digress. So, tools. You've got access to all of these things. You can record the Zoom sessions. You can play them back frame by frame. You can, take my recording and play it back frame by frame. You can, track these in different ways. There's third-party tools. We have tools that we use that we developed in-house specifically for coaching and for leadership. That are designed to give you the data to support that. In a one-on-one example, when you're working with someone on your team or you're coaching someone, right, you're taking maybe some of these notes. This person pauses under 2 seconds in 8 instances, made eye contact 3 seconds, all sorts of stuff like that. We had a coach on our team that actually was great at that. I called him the observer, right? In the debrief, this becomes very difficult to change. Okay, so the behavior intelligence or the AccuMatch behavior intelligence method shifts. You need to be more assertive in meetings. What does that look like? What do you mean? I think I'm pretty assertive. What does that have to do with anything? Right? Okay. Whereas the right language is, I tracked 4 instances where you started to speak, then stopped when you're interrupted. This comes across as weak. Let's practice completing sentences even when others jump in. A couple of friends of mine are great at that. I constantly struggle with that and work on that. So it's very clear action. It's measurable progress. You can pick at it very easily, right? So what does that look like is important. Now, this slide's probably the most important slide of today. I've given you a lot of foundation, a lot of tools, a lot of ideas, but you need to realize the cause effect, all right? Causality, we call it. I have a tool called the causality loops, and we dive into a lot of this in that. But we often measure the stuff on the left and make that the performance measurements. Okay, we reward people based on the stuff on the left when we should actually be rewarding with the stuff on the right. Okay, so sales numbers will only improve when people do the follow-up routinely, consistently, they're persistent habits. Okay, we specifically look for that when we are mapping salespeople using AccuMatch. Okay, I can show you the points on the map that relate to someone who can do this automatically, unconsciously, versus someone that needs to learn to do that. So the performance guidelines need to be the stuff on the right, but we've been focused totally on the left. Okay. Customer satisfaction. I often have outbursts when I get poor customer service. I try to help the management to understand that, the measurement is wrong. Okay, we're often measuring the volume of tickets closed rather than measuring the level of empathy, listening, active listening, all of the things that actually affect customer satisfaction, right? Closing a lot of tickets can lose you a lot of clients if the client doesn't feel like the problem's been solved, right? Okay, they've not been listened to. So which are you measuring is critical. Mm-hmm. Project completion. What happened? What's the rhythm? I talked about that last week. I had a $40 million project that I needed to get conclusion on. And the only thing we did was really fix the communication loop. Right? It was just a matter of getting people talking, engaging, and so forth. So such a simple thing, but we were struggling with that under many different leaders before I introduced that. And I talked about that last week, so I won't go into that too much more. Team performance, what does it look like? Is there feedback? Is there camaraderie? Can you observe that? Can you see it? If you want to build team performance, you've got to look at those things that you need to measure. If you want to shift the culture, you've got to measure the things that impact the culture, right? That was an important slide. So engineering the foundation, we call it, okay? This is the behavior intelligence, engineering the behaviors that will be the foundation to that shift, okay? Traditional approach, we need better customer retention. What does that really mean, okay? We need systematic post-sale check-ins within 48 hours, monthly satisfaction surveys, and quarterly value-add workshops, okay? Very specific things that are behaviors that affect that, right? And the value-add workshops are the things that we were talking about. So you can build workshops around those things. In fact, can I go back here, right? If you pick one of these things, you can depersonalize instead of picking on one person and saying you're a good listener or whatever. Why don't we run workshops to educate the whole team and get the team dynamics so it's depersonalized instead of pointing the finger at an individual, right? So lifting the level together, that allows the other team members to also participate in helping that one person. So it's not from the top down. It's not a parent-child relationship as we talk about in psychology. It's a peer-to-peer relationship, and we know that's far more powerful than the parent-child relationship. Okay, so sustainable change can come from that. So list 3 things. All right, these are your 4 steps. We've talked about the 3 steps. Now we can work on this at a bigger scale. Let's say you're doing a 90-day plan, a quarterly plan, or 13-week, as some people call it. What are the 3 critical invisible behaviors that you want to address? Do the audit, all right? Okay, and stick with it for a month at least on each one, so you get your 3 done, okay? And track and report on these things to improve, right? So when we did that, this client switched from a 23% customer churn down to 12% and increased the customer satisfaction and upsell opportunities. The bottom line impact was a 50% increase in revenue, okay? It's not on the slide, but that's what happens when you get these things right. And it's not hard to do one thing, okay, in a month, right? And here's your homework for the next week, because next week I dive into the next phase of what you do also within this and what's going to happen and what you need to watch for. So pick one, okay, and run the 3-day behavior mapping sprint that I mentioned, okay, and build the scorecard of the 3 dimensions and implement it, okay. What's invisible will drive you to move forward in your success. If you want more information, like I said, this is straight out of the book. What we've done is really taken some of the summaries from the book, and these workshops lessons are designed to go hand in hand with the book. So watch for the launch of the book. Do one of the assessments. Reach out. You can find me. I said you can do that. Let me bring that up here. Okay. So if you want to contact me, you can find me on BIQ.org, Nagui at BIQ.org.com. You can also view the past sessions on the events page. So do reach out and do that. Okay. So next week, why is it important? We are going to look at your emotions, the facts versus feelings, what goes on, how that works, right? Your emotions color your observation. In fact, as you are observing me today, your emotions, that are happening there are either skewing it positively or negatively. Maybe you don't like my style, or or you love it. And if you love it, it's great. And now we're going to dive into understanding that more next week. So that's it for me today. So thank you for joining. As usual, we'll be online and looking for your questions to answer your needs and deal with those as they come up. So thank you. And enjoy your week. Have a fantastic time. Get those results. I'll see you next session.